Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, class. I would like to thank you for your time and effort watching this video for your online learning. As we all know that your subject and me is entitled Public Policy and Program Administration, today I will start my lecture on the lesson in Module 1 entitled Understanding the Concept of Public Policy. But before that, I would like you to pause and think. I would like you to think four or more public policies in your locality that is existing or even in our country that you are familiar with. A policy can be in the form of a law, a rule, a regulations, or even an ordinance. Anything you are familiar. Now think about it. In 5 seconds. One, two, three, four, five. Now, question. How many policies did you remember? Is it one, two, three, or even more? Well, if you do have remembered five or more policies existing in our country or in your locality, it actually defines your personality as an essential member of the society. The more you know about public policies, the more you would become a great public servant. And the more you are ignorant of it, the more you would become a problem of the government. As the Constitution says, ignorance of the law excuses no one. So now, let's equip your knowledge on public policies. In Lesson 1, page 3 in your Module 1, it is entitled Public Policy in General. The objective of this lesson is for you to define and explain the definition, types, and characteristics of public policy. So let's start with the definition. As reflected in your handout, public policy is a set of actions of government decides to take when approaching a problem that affects society as a group rather than on an individual level. Take note, set of actions. What does it mean? It means that it is the government expression of their actions. Taken from what? Taken from the problems existing in the country or even in your locality. So specifically, this is their response to the needs of the society, including your needs. Okay? Another is public policy is an essential function of government and as a tool for addressing societal challenges. It is the result of a great number of individuals working together to solve common problems. So, what does it mean? Thus, programs and projects are created based on these public policies established to solve the society's issues and problems. Upon a public policy is created, programs are administered through provision of different projects and activities. Let's move on to the types of public policies. We have regulatory policy, we have distributive, redistributive, and constituent policy. First, the regulatory policy. What do we mean by regulatory policy? Regulatory policy imposes restrictions or limitations on the behavior of individuals or groups. It is conceived to preserve orderliness in a community by prohibiting behaviors perceived negatively by the general society. This can be attained by setting up restrictions that hinder citizens, groups, or corporations from engagement in activities that disrupts political and social order. So, when we say regulatory, its purpose is what? From the word itself, it is to regulate. To regulate is to impose restrictions or limitations. This is how you can control a certain activity in your jurisdictions. For example, you as a student, how can I control your behavior inside the classroom? What shall I do? I need to regulate your activities. Put limitations on it so that you will not exceed to what am I expecting on you. In the society, how can you regulate the movement of the people? During this pandemic, what does the government provide to limit the movement of people from one place to another? What do you think? What does the government response to the global pandemic? If your answer is through imposing enhanced community quarantine or ECQ or even GCQ and social distancing, then you are absolutely right. This is one of the examples of a regulatory policy. Another examples would be traffic ordinances and anti-illegal drug policies. Second type is the distributive policy. Distributive policy extends the goods and services and distribute the cost of such goods and services among the entire population. It provides incentives to citizens, groups, or corporations to encourage them and inherently provide positive economic impacts. So, one example is the distribution of farm subsidies for farmers that is expected to increase supply of agricultural products that can positively affect supply and demand. Another examples would be educational policies, fiscal policies, and tax policies. The third type would be the redistributive policy. Redistributive policy shifts the allocation of wealth, income, and property from one group to another and often involves class conflict. It is purposely created to promote equality, and one example of it is the graduated income tax. Question: what would be the difference between the two type of public policy, the distributive and redistributive? When we say distributive, the cost of goods and services are given to the entire population. But since we have different status, we have rich, we have middle class, we have lower class, we have poor, it was allocated or transferred to the wealthy people. So the burden of these taxes or cost of services are redistributed. So it means that it was allocated or transferred to the wealthy people. That's why there is what we call graduated tax policy, wherein business people or wealthy people have their own classification, and based on this classification, for example, you own a private corporation, your tax is 20%. If you own a sari-sari store, is your tax is 20% also? No, your tax would be 3%. But remember, the figures I am stating is for analogy only. Okay? This is not the exact percentage tax being paid by these people. So let's go back. As I said, there is such limitation that are imposed within the graduated tax policy. This percentage of tax is based from your income source. That's why the redistributive policy is created to promote equality and equity. Okay? I hope you get it. Now, let's go to the last one, the constituent policy. Constituent policy is connected mainly to the development of a new department's internal distribution of funds and rules for public servants. Such a policy is focused on government institutions and procedures. Take note, if it focused on the government institutions, the rules or policies within the structure and procedures in an government institutions. So, when we say structures, it is related to the mandates and functions. When it comes to procedures, we are talking about its operations. For example, we have omnibus rules from the civil service, memorandum of orders, and etc. So we go now to the characteristics of public policy. First one, public policy is a purposive course of action or goal-oriented action rather than a random or chance behavior, which means it is made to achieve a certain objectives. There is such a purpose or goals. Public policy consists of course of actions or patterns of action by government officials. What does it mean? This means that it has a process before it is undertaken. Public policy is what governments actually do, not what they intend to do or say they are going to do. It indicates that government made policies not because they have said it or promise it, nor that is their intention, but because it is mandated to them. It is actually their regular activity. Public policy involves some forms of overt. When we say overt, it is open. Open government action to affect a particular problem. It involves a decision by government officials not to take action, to do nothing on some matter on which governmental involvement is sought. Public policy is based on law and is authoritative. There is such power, there is such authority. Public policy is sometimes an outcome of bargaining and compromise among political or policy actors and various interest groups in the policy process. Okay? Before I end this lesson, I want to give you an activity for the purpose of enriching your learning. This will serve as your assignment. The deadline will be announced in our group chats and Google Classroom. Our other announcements will posted accordingly. This is just a simple activity for you. First, provide five examples. Provide five specific examples of a regulatory policy that exists in the province of La Union and discuss each policy according to its objectives and functionality. This is 20 points. So, good luck and keep safe, everyone.